So the C2 High program, if you don't know, this program is the creativity program, okay? So this is the fun class. This is the class that your students are going to love you as a teacher. You are the cool teacher. You are the fun teacher. The C1 teacher, that's the boring teacher. They're the ones who make us do horrible things, okay? So keep that in mind when you're doing this class, right? It should be a lot of fun, okay? And students should really enjoy it. If you've taught the if you've taught the V1 program before, it's actually going to be kind of similar. You should be able to transition pretty easily. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So overall, this is the agenda for the workshop. I'll be doing a general class structure, program overview and objectives, smart textbooks, class components, and then some reminders and questions at the end. Okay. Okay. So keep in mind the segment guides are posted on the FTP. Either your BM or your FM or team leader should have provided that to you or will provide that to you soon. They're still updating some of the materials, so make sure you check that throughout the term. Okay. With that, okay, here, this is some of the things that I'll be going over. However, I will be doing some modifications and changes and giving you some simple tips and tricks. Okay. So for example, one area is the class structure. Okay, so this isn't the exact class structure that is posted on the segment guide. This is pretty much the overall general idea that I'm doing in my classroom when I'm teaching the class. Okay, so here in the first hour, you're going to be looking to begin, okay, the perspective exploration, stimulus, concept context. Okay, and then by the second hour, you want to start developing research, okay? And then the third hour, if possible, you want to make sure that you're ready to go and you're starting the project, okay? So remember, this is supposed to be a project class, so you want to make sure you give enough time. So some of the things to keep in mind for the projects is that they do change, the output changes. Odd weeks is mainly focused on a writing project, and then even weeks are mainly focused on a presentation project. With the presentation, the time allotted for it is a little bit longer. Okay, so meaning that project should take a little bit more time, where the writing projects are usually a little bit shorter. However, I think either way, a general idea is that in the third hour, I should be having my students working on projects, creating ideas, right? And that way there's plenty of time to do output and presentation, okay? For the program objectives, okay, just similar to the C1, there are like three main objectives that you're looking for. Some of the key points to notice about the C2, which is also different from the B1, is number one, we're looking for them to develop their knowledge and analysis of nonfiction books. Okay, I know a lot of students think that nonfiction isn't fun. They're like, no, I like Harry Potter. I like, Lord of the Rings, all these types of books. But the truth is, I think nonfiction is way more interesting, okay? In addition, the nonfiction books are much easier to teach because they aren't a full story. Meaning if a student doesn't finish a chapter or misses a class, they don't miss a whole section of the story that they might need in order to understand the narrative, right? So for these nonfiction books, they're usually broken up into smaller sections, which means it should be a little bit more manageable for the students. Second, it is a project-based learning, so you have to get creative, okay? You as the teacher, right, can make amazing projects. Don't rely on just your students. You're going to need to plan something out, and you're going to have a goal every class on what type of output and what type of information you want your students to include in their final projects. Okay. Lastly, similar to the C2 low levels, we're always looking at perspectives. Okay. Perspectives. We're looking at different angles of things. We're trying to help them form opinions of their own by introducing different ideas. Okay. For the C2, each level will have one book that you will use. So these are the three books, okay? Chew on This is a pretty old one that we've used several times, okay? Here, The Robots Are Coming, as well as Under a White Sky. These are pretty new, okay? So the old books used to be, what was it? The Freakonomics, some other things like that, right? Again, they were nonfiction books due to feedback from teachers, okay? Some of these books were suggested and then they decided to make some adjustments, okay? So with the books, just like V1, the biggest problem, of course, is the reading, okay? So just like V1, students are supposed to do the reading at home, okay? So if you look, okay, each book will have its own syllabus and then there is reading homework, okay? Day one, just keep in mind the students did not receive the books or they do not have the books, so therefore don't expect them to have read the book, okay? A lot of them might not even have their books on the first day, so you're going to need to take that time to guide them through the book a little bit more. And that's actually really good because it's a time where you can also teach them and show them your expectations on what you expect them to do while they're reading. For example, they should be active readers, I usually tell my students. That means they should be underlining, highlighting, and making notes on specific sections of the book. This is a time where you can start establishing that right on day one, okay? I do know that you can print out, for example, little bookmarks. So you can make little bookmarks with little tips and tricks and things that you might want them to do. For example, if you think a quote is important, you underline it. If you meet a character or an event or something, you put a triangle around it, okay? So when you make these little bookmarks, then students, while they read, they can remember what they should do. It's also much easier to check their books if you want. To see if they did the homework. So usually I'll do is I'll pick up their books and I'll just flip through it. As long as I see some annotations, I'm going to assume that they completed the reading. Okay. So with the reading, one thing to keep in mind is some of the books can have a different page number. For Chew on This, for example, if you see here, there's a 2006 edition and a 2017 edition. It is extremely annoying. So I know that some has happened in V1 also, but just keep in mind what edition your branch is using and what your students are using, because they might be two different editions, okay? And that's not just for Chew on This, that could be for all the books, okay? So just keep that in mind when you're preparing and when you're looking in the segment guides or you're looking at the Smart Textbook, your page number and the book that you're using might not always match up, okay? So just keep that in mind, okay? All right, so of course, like I said, one of the hardest things is to get them to always read. Okay, so here it's important that you establish those rules in the beginning, like I said, as well as teach them proper ways to annotate the book. Again, remember, these are nonfiction books, so each chapter is kind of like a new start. They still have the ability to like jump back in, or even if a student is late to the term or joins midterm, they can still do it. Okay, to help you with that, there is also a perspective exploration. This will be both in their workbook. So on the right-hand side is their workbook, and it'll be in the Smart Textbook starting in lesson 2, okay? So you will tell them for their homework, okay, they should answer the questions in the perspective exploration. Here, they give the page number, and there are a couple of multiple choices, just like you would do if you're doing the V1 program. So this will simply allow them, okay, to answer the questions, okay, and it'll be easier when they come back to class, okay? So now what you're supposed to do, they say in the guide, is that after they do the workbook, right, when they come to class on lesson 2, in the Smart Book, there will be the same exact questions. It'll be on the first page, okay, of the lesson 2. And I'll show you guys that in the Smart Book, okay? So here, okay, this is lesson 2, remember, okay? C2 Albatross, the first page will be the perspective exploration. This is the same thing as their homework book. So if you want, you could say, hey, transfer all your answers from your homework book into the Smart Textbook, and then you can collect their answers and see who gets it correct and who gets it incorrect. Usually what I'll do with this is I'll see and I'll gauge how well my students have done the reading. And then I know maybe what concepts or what ideas or what sections I maybe need to take more time on and what sections they already know and I can just have a discussion on. And that'll be later on in some of the sections, okay? So overall, the lesson is really composed of 3 components, okay? The first component is the stimulus. You'll have this at the beginning of your lesson and at the end of your lesson, pretty much, before the project. The stimulus is just introducing the topic, helping them build their own perspective, and then going back to that perspective once they've learned some information, okay? So they have like the stimulus in the beginning, and then it comes again once you've learned and you've gone over the book a little, okay, to see what their opinions are or what their perspective is and if there's any change to them. Then you have the concept context pages. This is basically just the reading review. It's the same stuff that you're doing in the perspective exploration. It's just in more detail, okay? So here in the book, again, for lesson 1, this is where I would be showing them how to annotate my book or how to actively read. But as the lesson continues, you can have them just type in blanks, true, false questions. And then at the end, there will always be a discussion based on the topic of that section of the book. The third part would be the project Okay. The project, like I said, there's two types, a writing one and a collaborative presentation one. So the project is broken up into like personal project. These are parts where students are supposed to be thinking independently, coming up with ideas, and then it's mixed into a collaborative part where they work together, they share their ideas, and then they come up with a one project as a group. Okay. So just to give you an idea, okay, these are the parts that we just went over. Okay, the perspective exploration. Okay, this is just the review of the homework. Okay, then you have the stimulus where you introduce the day's topic and you gather their first perspective on the ideas. Then the concept context, we review the reading sections that they had to do for homework. There'll be about 3 or 4 pages of those. Okay. After you've done that, you revisit the stimulus again and see if their perspectives have changed, and they should at least be able to support whatever their opinion is a little bit stronger. Okay. Afterwards, there is the research skills, which I'll go over individually next, but then comes the project. Okay. The project, like I said, there are personal parts and then collaborative parts, and that can run a good hour easily. So you're going to want to review that. Like I said, you're going to want to have a goal. Okay. There's probably about like 7 or 8 slides for those, and I'll show you those in a second. Okay. So moving on to the develop perspective, the research skills. So again, research skills are really important for your students, not only in C2 high, but in C2 low, like C2 birdie, right? You should remember when you train, right? Tiger moms, right? How would you research that, right? If students are looking up keywords, this can be difficult for them. If a student goes on the internet and just looks up tigers, right? That's not going to give the type of information that they're looking for. You want to teach them, oh, well, what are we talking about? We're talking about tiger parenting, okay? Oh, also, what is our opinion? We're looking for either harmful or the beneficial effects. The same thing is here when you're doing the higher levels, okay? Hopefully in the lower levels, they have a little bit more experience, so they will have an idea about it, okay? So there's 3 ways that I have as a suggestion that you can implement this, okay? Well, number 1 is the easiest way, and you could just have and use this as kind of like an opinion speaking, right? So you can just ask them, what is your opinion on today's topic, right? And they can just give you an opinion speaking. I agree or I disagree, right? And you can teach them how to use I agree, right? First reason, right? Second reason, just like you would in an opinion or independent speaking question. Okay. Then the information or reasons they could use are directly from the book. You could say, hey, I want you to go back to today's lesson, right? Use dual screen or unsynchronized. And then they could say, oh, in chapter blah, 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 right? It said that robots are beneficial because of blah, 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 right? For example, they're being used in restaurants and serving people, right? Or I disagree, right? Millions of people and servers are losing their jobs in 2000 because once again, remember the book is nonfiction. So you will have statistics and information that they can use. So that's usually like the easiest way, okay? And it doesn't really use research. It's more like they already did their research in the book, okay? Another way is to have okay, news reports or YouTube or a video. So here's a video, right, about South Korea starting their, driverless vehicles or driverless taxis. You'll play the video, okay, which is pretty easy, and you'll remind them, hey, I want you to take some notes on some facts and some information. So here, I won't play the whole thing.
Visitors to Sangam-dong can now travel around in a self-driving car. A ride-hailing service that uses the autonomous vehicle is now open to the public. While there are only 2 routes available now, it's set to expand in the near future. Kim Bo-kyung sheds light on this development.
In the near future, you might not need a driver's license nor have to struggle to keep focused on long-distance drives.
Okay, and then you can elicit, hey, so you won't need a driver's license. Oh, that's great, right? Oh, you won't even need to focus, okay? Is that a benefit? Or is that, what do you think? Oh, it's a benefit. Why? Oh, there may be less accidents, right? And less people will die, blah, 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 right? So here you can have a video and then they can write in their reasons or summary of the information. Another thing you can do is you can just print off, right, an easy news article, right? Keep in mind that most news articles are created so that the general public can read it. And I would say a majority of our students at Eagle, Alba, and Albatross Plus can easily read any American newspaper. Okay, so find an article, BBC, CNN, Reuters, those are those easy ones, right? Usually I might edit it a little, that way it's not all like pictures and stuff like that, and then just paste it into a Word doc and print it out. Give everyone a copy, tell them to look over it and take out some information that they think is important, okay? In addition, okay, one thing I keep in mind when I do provide some type of research or some type of video is I am thinking about the final project and what I want them to do for the final project, okay? And I try to actually use an article or I try to use a video that might help give them some ideas when the final project comes, okay? So for here, we're talking about like AI and stuff like that and robots and computer. So obviously it should all somewhat relate. So just keep that in mind. Don't just use a random article. Try to think of something that will help them in their final project, okay? In addition, I do sometimes use this kind of as a mini presentation, okay? So depending on how fast and how well they know the reading, so you might have some classes, they're stellar, they do all the reading, they understand everything. So this is also a great time for them to stand up, right, in their desk or even up to the front of the class. You can have one or few or all students, depending on your time, and then they will present, right? Remember, C2 is all about presentation, all about project, all about the output, right? So here I'd have them stand up to the front of class. They can bring their tablet and they'll be like, hello, my name is Peter. Today we are discussing, right, the harmful and beneficial effects of robots, right? I believe, da, 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 da. Each student can do it, and it's another great way to practice their opinion speaking, which they'll need to do for the level up test later on, okay? Moving on. Okay, all right. So for the iLearning, okay, some of the homework that you're going to need to remember, there's something called Career Note. It's also in week 1. It happens every 3 weeks. So it's 3, 6, 9, 12. It is a review of the information, okay? So basically what they say is you're supposed to eliminate some parts of the other class. You can check the guide for it. And basically it's the same idea. It's the idea of, hey, what type of careers do you want? What do you want to do in the future? What jobs will it be available and stuff like that, okay? So keep that in mind. All right. Okay, we're going to move on to the project part now, okay? So for the project, right, there are several sections that you're going to need to go through. However, I'll be honest with you, you should talk to your FM, you should talk to your TL. Modifications are usually, I would say, across the board, usually done. Okay, unless you're brand new to Cheongdam, meaning you just finished training, then yes, you should probably follow the guides that are provided to you until you get more comfortable. But most teachers are going to make modifications. Okay, so here are some suggestions and some examples for your projects, right? Keep in mind, again, you want to think about the long-term goal, right? When I'm prepping my class, I'm thinking about, hey, what do I want my students to output? What do I want their final presentation to be? What is it that I want the goals to be? Okay, so keep that in mind. So there are writing projects. Don't be scared of them. Don't shy away from them, okay? So a lot of teachers are like, oh, well, and students will also be like, oh, no, teacher, we don't want to write. We don't want to write, right? But still, writing is important, okay? I'll be honest, some of the students' writing is horrible. It is horrific, right? They're great speakers, right? They can do better on the IBT TOEFL than I can and probably half of us, but at the same point, their writing is just atrocious. So here, okay? There are different ways you can do it, right? You can have a newspaper, okay? Newspapers are probably one of my go-to ways, right? Here in a template, you should make it, provide it to them. Now, yes, they can have articles directly related to the topic, right? Like Hagwon replaces teachers with AI computers. Oh no, right? Here though, in addition to that, they can add other articles and other side articles. They can have advertisements. They can have the news. They can have the weather. They can add other things, and it's still allowing them to practice their writing, okay? Here, they could be in the future. It could be in the past, okay? For a good example, a lot of times I'll do this for the literature programs, right? One of my final projects will also be a newspaper, and they have to put all the characters in the newspaper and tell stories about each one outside of the stories that we have already read, okay? In addition, especially for these tracks, for C2 High, it's really talking about like, is this good for society? Is this bad for society? So a good one is always like utopia and dystopia. You could have a whole lesson. You explain what a utopia is. You explain what a dystopia is, right? And then they can create their own stories, okay? The third one, which is not as fun, so I didn't make like a cool slide or anything, but the third one would be the personal essay. Remember, for the final, right, the level up test, C2 High will need to create a personal essay. So these are great times to start, okay, introducing and having them practice different personal essays, okay? So these are just two, right, or three suggestions that you can do when you're doing the writing component, okay? In addition, though, all projects, whenever I'm doing a project or a presentation, I always tell my students they have to have their parts written and has to be written down. Not always does it have to be written in like full sentences and like perfect grammar and paragraph form, but they always need to know what they're going to present and what they're going to say, okay? So leading on for other presentations, okay, in order to help facilitate the class and make sure that your presentations, right, improve and students, right, get better at this and your projects also improve, it's also important for teachers, okay, you can create templates and directions, especially if you're doing modifications to your project, okay? So here, these are just very simple templates, right? So what you can do is you can then make multiple copies of it, okay? You can share them with all the classes and all the teams, right? So each team will have their own template, right? In the template, you can have some basic directions that you'll go over before they get started in the project. The directions will also be there for them to refer back to while they're doing the project. That way you can do other things on your screen or your tablet as needed. In addition, then you can provide them maybe with 3 or 4 different sections that they need to include in their final presentation. Of course, these aren't the only ones that they have to include, and they can modify them, but at least you're giving them, right, some guidance and some direction, okay? When you do this, though, what I like, though, is you can also, if you have a laptop or your own tablet or whatever, you can then go into each one of their projects and you can kind of like modify, or you could like yell at them. So I'll usually yell at them, be like, hey, that's the wrong word, right? Or what word are you trying to say? Spell it correct. Give me a capital letter. Where's my period, right? Simple things like that. Or sometimes I'll notice that they're just copying, pasting from like the internet. Like, I'm like, what does this word mean? And they'll be like, I don't know. I was like, well, where'd you get it from? I don't know. Oh, either you got to figure it out or, you know, you got to change the word or something like that, right? Sometimes it's really funny, some of the stuff that they'll be writing on. But here, this is just an easy way to get them started and show them how to make proper PPTs, how to make proper presentations, okay? One thing also, depending on how many people are in the group, you always want to make sure that you have enough parts, that everyone has a part, okay? So sometimes what I'll do is I'll also tell them to put their names on different slides. So I want to know who's doing slide number 3. I want to know who's doing slide number 4, and so forth, right? Then I know who's working, who's not working, and I'm sure that everyone has a part and everyone will have something to present at the end, okay? All right. In addition, I would say these are pretty basic. I think this is something that all the Eagle, Alba, and Albatross Plus students will have no problem doing. Okay. If anything, I think these templates might be a little bit simple, and they usually take it to a higher level. But it's still a good guidance, and it has the categories and everything that they need. In addition to that, there are other projects you can do. Here's a few projects that I've done. Okay. Where is it? Okay, you can have a debate, okay? Like I said, depending on the topic, right? A lot of them are perspectives. Do you think this is good for society or do you think this is bad for society, right? You can have them create a law, right? You can have a policy. If you know debates, then great. But even if you don't know debates, you can still have them, right, break out their arguments, right? Each team has an argument. Of course, this works better with smaller groups, but you could also just have, right, smaller classes where there's like 4 against 4, but you can also just have them each come up and present their arguments. Say you have like 4 groups, right? Teams of 3, they come up, they state their position, and they give, right, each person gives like a few arguments on why they think their position is the best for society and so forth, okay? You can have them actually design things like physical things, right? I know this takes like a lot more, but I know teachers, they do it before. They'll make three-dimensional things. They'll make setups of things, right? They could build their city. They can explain their city, right? Kind of like, hey, this is like a pitch for our new design, our new city. It doesn't always have to be three-dimensional, and I know it gets really messy, and I know Cheongdam doesn't really provide us with, you know, all the materials and stuff like that, but that's really up to you. You could also have them draw pictures and stuff like that, but remember, it's not an art class though. It's important that they're describing their picture and explaining their ideas and why this is beneficial, okay? Another one that I really like to do, but this one I definitely take some supplies, is I have them create a board game. So board games are really fun. So like, for example, they can make like an alien game or a game of life or something like that, right? Here they make a board, right? I'll usually bring like some dice, some deck of cards and stuff like that. And depending on the amount of time that I have on days when I can do this, I will sometimes allow them to play their game. So what I do is I have the team switch, right? So one person who invented the game will explain the game to the other team. They'll play the game for a few minutes and then they'll switch again. That way they get to play everyone else's game. And then I have a vote whose game is the best. Which game did you make the most sense? Which game did you have absolutely no idea what you're doing? And sometimes it's funny because their games will be so bad that it like in 2 turns, somebody is winning, or in 2 turns, like they realize nobody can win this game. So I explain to them like, hey, your directions or the way you planned out the game and stuff like that. It's really fun, but it's really only fun if you get the materials though. So it is something I only do with like really good classes that I think, okay, they can get this done and I'm willing to put in that, you know, financial effort, I guess, and buy some materials and supplies and then bring it in, okay? The last one is like, kind of like, I don't know, art mixed with words and stuff like that. So like, I mean, honestly, in artistic sense, you could do like poetry, but I know a lot of the kids, they don't like poetries, but it's really fun sometimes. Like you can do like haikus and you can explain the haiku, or what is that other one? I forget that other one. I always have to Google it. I forget the name of it, but it's the Japanese one that doesn't matter. Like if it rhymes or not, it could just be in that order. Like you have to like go 3, 5, 3 or something, the syllables in the words. I forget what it's called. I apologize. Does anyone remember? Anybody? No? Okay, so somebody's got to know. Someone's just like, haha, I know. I'm not telling you. Okay.
Tanka, Tanka.
Tanka, is that? Okay, thank you. Okay, in addition, there's also the ones where, if you don't know, like you take a word and like you write the word down, right? And then for the first letter of each word you have to do. But that's not going to take as long to actually create, but it can be really fun. And it's really funny what they come up with. So you can do different things. Like you have to use 7 vocabulary words in your poem, which makes it really hard, right? And then also what they can do is they have to explain like what their poem means or what is like stuff like that. I don't know, just some ideas and stuff like that. In addition, you can also have them make songs. Songs are really fun. I've had my students make their own songs before. That's another like artistic, and that basically I run it like it's a norebang, right? So pretty much they just need to write the words, okay? And then we look up like a song that they're familiar with as a group, and we just look up the melody, but they can look at the lyrics, and then they just have to like match the syllables, okay? So like, you know, if they can't think of a song, I usually tell them they have like 5 minutes to decide as a team, right, what song they're going to do. And then if they can't think of a song, I tell them that they have 2 choices. They can either do ABC or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And then they don't realize that it's the same melody. It doesn't matter. So then I tell them they have to do it twice, right? And it's a lot of fun if you can get your students to do it. Of course, I'm sure you're thinking about it and you're like, no way, my kids won't do it. They will do it, and it's really fun. And usually, obviously, the 4 p.m. kids are a little bit more, you know, willing to get it done than your 7 p.m. kids. But then basically, I put the words up on the TV. We play the melody without the lyrics, and then we all try to like sing the song pretty much using the melody that they've created. So that's a fun way to get the project done. Okay, so again, these are just some ideas and suggestions for your project. Okay, I suggest and when I do this class, I always recommend think of what you want the project to be. Think about what the output is going to be for that class. And then I look at the concept context. I think of the research. I think of my stimulus and my discussion questions, and I try to guide them with ideas and things that they're going to be able to use in the final project. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, it just makes the project go a lot better and develops it. I will say though, with presentation, it is a skill. Okay, with projects, it is a skill. Okay, so therefore, you shouldn't go all out on your first day. Make sure that they understand like basic introductions, that they understand basic visuals, how to use PPTs, how to organize themselves, right? How to work as a team. So these are all just basic things that I would be establishing in the beginning of my class or the beginning of the term. And then as the term progresses, I'll make the classes and the projects a little bit more, right, exciting and interesting. Okay, so moving on. Okay, for the projects, a big component that a lot of teachers do forget, I feel that they don't really give enough time on, and that is the feedback, okay? So in the SMART book, especially during the presentation days, okay, during the even weeks, you'll have a slide at the very end asking students to evaluate each other, okay? I think it's really important that they evaluate each other, that they give feedback. I don't think the rubrics is that easy for students to understand, right? Development, the breadth of their perspective, the depth of their personalization. I just don't think kids are really grasping that much, okay? So usually what I'll do is I now have just like a slide, but you can also just write it on the board. So peer-to-peer feedback. I'll ask my students, sit down, everyone clap. Oh, that's a big thing. I always make them clap before and after. Welcome them and end it. But here, speaking, were they loud and clear? Could you hear them? Okay, we all have those students, right? Especially with masks on now, like you can't hear a thing. Did they use phrases or vocabulary? So basically like, I'll usually assign like specific vocabulary they need to use or specific phrases that they need to use in their presentation. But then I also tell them always to memorize. I tell them to memorize, but no, I never, ever like make them memorize. I always say, try. Like, I have to memorize. I have to memorize. Try, right? It's not so much the memorization part, it's more just the practice part. So it's not the first time they're coming up and reading their part for the first time. So in the project, I always give them 5 minutes. It doesn't matter if they're done with everything or not done with everything. Everyone needs to stand up in their groups and start talking their part to each other. That way different team members can listen to each other, hear each other and say, hey, no, that's wrong, right? And they'll realize as soon as they do it in the first minute, who goes first? I don't know, who's doing the introduction? I don't know, someone's got to do the introduction. I was, right? So, that's always important. Then the presentation part, I'll usually ask my students, did everyone have an equal part? Was it equal or unequal? A lot of times we'll have those students, you know, who are just like killing it and they're just doing like the whole presentation while other kids are just like, thank you for listening, okay? Here, can you follow along with the visuals or usually with an act or a story? Did it make sense? Like, did they break it down? Did they give us like, hey, scene 1, did they set it up, okay? Then any visuals or PowerPoints, all right? Sometimes it drives me crazy. And that's also why I like to send them a template, because if they do it on their own, the PowerPoints, and like, it's like a bright yellow with like a bright green font, because they like all these, I'm like, I can't see anything, but I'm blind now. Thank you very much, right? Or their font is like the size of like 5, and it's like, what's the matter with you, okay? What's the matter with you? Seriously. And then the last part is the creativity part. This is more like, hey, what did you enjoy, right? And this could be like, oh, they were really funny. They acted really well. You have those one kids who'll get into the role, right? And then my last one is, if you were in this group, is there anything you would add or change? Is there any suggestion pretty much? Like, how could they improve? That's pretty much what it is. I just find this works a little bit easier, okay? And no, I don't make every single student give this feedback, but I do call on individuals randomly. Okay, that way everyone's paying attention. You can add other things like factual things depending on what the project is. So for example, like simple factual things are like, oh, did they agree or disagree? Did they think it's positive or negative, right? And then how did they explain it, right? And then the last one I always ask them is, who is the best presenter? Pick one person, right? And I always find that the students, especially the ones who are presenting, they really get into it. They really like it. So like you would say, oh, I think Sally was the best presenter. And I'd ask, oh, why? Why? Just because Sally's a girl and girls are better than boys or something? And they'll be like, no, no, no. And I'm like, okay, well, why then? Why? Is it because she's your friend and you're buddies with her? No, no. And then they'll have to give me a reason why Sally is the best presenter. And then I'll always have Sally say thank you. Okay. And then students get into that. And then usually with the best presenter one, as they get used to it throughout the term, I'll just ask who has someone they think was the best? Who do they think? And then you'll get a lot of hands up and students like, oh, right. That way they interact with each other and they're giving each other feedback. Okay. In addition to that, it's important that you also provide them with your own feedback, okay? I'll be honest with you, that's the most important thing. That's what students really want to know. And it's a great time to help them with their speaking, with their pronunciation, with their grammar, all these things, right? You can also highlight students who are doing well. You use their presentation as an example for the other students to follow along with, okay? All right, so with that, just little tips. I mean, honestly, I know you don't need to always, but it is like, I don't know, it looks good if you're like taking notes. So like I'll sit down in the student's desk and I'll be like, oh yeah, right? And I'll just look really busy and stuff, right? And that way you can actually give good feedback and remember different things that they did or things that you liked. Okay. Sometimes depending on my time, I won't give my feedback until the very end of the class. Right. So everyone gets back and everyone round of applause. All projects were great. Good job. I want to highlight a few people. Right. So I might highlight different groups. I might highlight individuals. And then it's also a great time, if you don't know, you can give the badges. Right. So you can give 3 badges per class. Right? They're free, they're easy, and kids love them, especially the elementary. And then you just give them a badge and say, hey, I thought you did a great job on your speaking, right? You had one of the longest parts, the grammar, vocabulary is great. You could also give badges and say, hey, I give you a badge because I thought you were a team leader. I noticed that you got your team organized. You made sure that everyone knew their part, right? You helped out your team when they needed more ideas. You didn't take all the ideas, you gave the ideas, right? And it's a great way to start establishing, right, what you want in those final projects and also how students could work together, okay? If you don't know the badges, ask your FM, ask your TL. It's pretty easy. Swipe up, back, and like you just send it and stuff like that, okay? All right, so I'm gonna go through the SMART textbook just so you can see what it looks like. So again, this one is lesson 2, okay? Because it has the perspective exploration, but it's pretty much similar to lesson 1. You'll start off with the stimulus section. Okay, the stimulus section, it's just a short answer, a choose, right? Where do you see most technology improvements being made? How, right? They choose their answer or they can input their own answer, okay? After that, they're gonna go through, okay? And they're just gonna look at specific parts of the actual reading. It's nothing really big, it's just fill in the blanks, okay? Then mainly what you're trying to do is create the discussion, okay? So you can add extra media, images, stuff like that to help facilitate this discussion. Okay. Then the concept context. This is all the book, right? Remember, they should have already read the book and they've already answered questions on the perspective exploration. So, right, if everyone does perfect on perspective exploration, then a majority of them should already understand a majority of this stuff. If they actively annotated, the answer should already be underlined in a majority of their books also, okay? So it should be pretty quick to find the answer. Okay, if students are taking 5 to 10 minutes, that's probably because the students did not do the reading and they did not answer any of the perspective exploration. Okay, I do like that there's more true falses and multiple choice and not so much typing in answers, just because, you know, in B1, it just takes too long sometimes, right? It'd be much better if like you just click it or something, right? Again, there is a discussion here, depending on what I want to do for my final project. I do personally read specific paragraphs or specific sections of the book. Okay, so I would look for something. So for example, Oppenheimer ate at a restaurant that neither hosts waiters nor cooks. I would probably read this section because my final project would probably be something about making a restaurant or creating your own business, right? And then I would supplement it also with like a video or some images so that they could understand the concept. So again, there's a couple of pages of these. Okay. Okay, and then you go back to the stimulus. Okay, so here again, okay, it's almost identical to the question we asked before. Remember, they asked, hey, where do you see most technology being improved, right? School, work, stuff like that. So now we're looking at the same thing. Okay, and automotive, education, or restaurants, okay? But now why? Why do you see that? They can look right over the information we just discussed and all the images and everything that you've brought up in during the concept context part, hopefully better answer, right? Not just, oh, I think this because I think this, right? Some reasons and some support, okay? Perspective, remember the research, multiple ways you could do it, okay? Lesson 1, obviously, you're not gonna have as much time maybe, so make it pretty simple. Choose an article, choose a video, or have them do like an opinion speaking, okay? So here, this is the personal project, okay? So with the project, it's going to be broken down, like I said before, into a personal and collaborative and then presentation, okay? So the personal, they're supposed to be doing it individually and thinking about ideas, and then collaborative, obviously they do it with their teammates, okay? I don't think it really matters. You could probably have teams do it together, but I do like the idea of brainstorming as a class. Okay, so for example, if I have a team that has no ideas, I'll ask other teams for their ideas and stuff, okay? Here, it'll follow pretty much the same as the V1, like the EPIC process, if you know, empathize, personalize, individualize or something. I don't remember what they all stand for, okay? But here, for the project, again, I think the projects are typically pretty good for the C2, so, okay. Propose a plan to help people who have lost their jobs due to advancements in technology. Here, there is assessment, strategize, and action plan. You're supposed to go through all 3 sections. I will say sometimes, depending on like the class and stuff, I probably don't do all 3 sections. I would probably eliminate one of the sections, maybe assessment, and I would just do strategize and action plan. Okay, just because it's too much thinking and too many components to the parts or the project, it's just too much for the students. Okay. So empathize, okay? They answer some simple questions, personalize, and then share, okay? So they share their ideas, they work together, and then, hey, I thought this, or my idea is this, da 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 da. Okay, part 2, strategize. Okay, we're helping Mike find a new job. Mike, I'm sorry, man, you lost it. All right, and then collaborative. The action plan, okay? Find a job, fight back, other, okay? So again, I don't go over all these sections. They're just like too many. So you need to pick which sections you like and how you want to break it down. Remember, it's all about the end goal of it, okay? So here, presentation must include all 3 parts. Again, like I said, I don't normally do all 3 parts. It's very rare. So I would maybe eliminate the assessment part and I would have them, hey, we have a guy, Mike, he lost his job. I want a strategy and I want an action plan, right? So what can he do to get a new job, okay? Okay. Here, remember I said there's certain phrases or vocabulary I'll have students use. I usually always assign at least like 2 or 3 of these. Every student must have it. I'll help them use it, right? In addition, I always assign some vocabulary words from their book, so that way they can also use those and start learning those, okay? Okay. Here, they give us like little introduction and stuff. I think they did the same thing in V1 and they do the same thing in a lot of levels. It is good to have them use full sentences and stuff like that. But I think for the Eagle and Albatross Plus, they could probably make their own, just make sure that they still have those components, okay? And then here is the grading rubrics. Okay, like I said, I make my own grading rubrics. You can make it a media card. You can, write it on your board. And obviously, at the beginning, it'll be difficult for them. It'll be strange maybe to them to give feedback and like talk about their peers. But as your term progresses, it's just going to be easier and easier. Okay, and that's pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen. Just to show you lesson 1. So lesson 1, there is no personal perspective. It just goes straight to the stimulus, okay? But everything else is the same, okay? Concept context, okay? And remember, they have not done the reading. So these 3 pages, right? You're gonna wanna go in and show them a little bit more because they won't know it. And then there is a writing, project. So therefore you have less steps. So if you look here, right, it's just personal, collaborative. There's no presentation part. Okay, but at the same thing, you'll have 3 components that they're asking you to think about. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and Again, look at those, decide which ones that you're going to use and what you're going to do. Okay. These ones, maybe you could do all three. Doesn't look like it's that difficult. However, obviously the one that you'd want to focus on probably the most is the comfort and amenities, right? Because we're talking about robots coming in and, you know, running a hotel, design a hotel. Okay. All right. Okay. Just the last part is remember the homework assignments, right? So one, assign reading, right? It makes your life so much easier. Set standards, set expectations, right? The week 2, that kid who doesn't come in, set, you know, make them an example, right? But at the same point, have compassion, find out why, like, hey, why didn't you do your reading, right? But if they're not doing the reading, okay, in addition, talk to your FM, talk to your TL, maybe talk to the staff also if your staff are interactive with that, right? Because when they do the reading, the rest of your class goes a lot easier. Okay, workbook vocabulary, you should assign that usually. Okay, and then iLearning, it's actually not too much. They don't have like a ton of stuff. Collocation, vocabulary, production chunks, and persuasive application. Again, you can look those up in the actual segment guide. Okay, that is pretty much it. Does anyone have any questions or any comments about the C2 High program? You got to speak up. There's like 20 something. Nope. All right, guys. Well, then I'm going to end it. Thank you very much for coming. Have wonderful C2 classes. Remember, you are the fun teacher, so have fun.